Hare Krishna. Question: what is the role of sacrifice in a devotee's life? Should devotees consider sacrifice as a principle even in their material life? We understand sacrifice in our spiritual life as offering things to Krishna, but even giving up our conveniences for the sake of our profession, is that also a principle of sacrifice that we need to apply? Answer: yes. The word sacrifice, which actually is the translation that Prabhupada uses for yajna, and it is used by many other translators also, many other commentators, translators, scholars. But if we look at it both from the point of view of its Sanskrit original as well as the English etymology, the word sacrifice comes from the root sacred, sacralize. That means to make sacred by giving. And yajna also has that same principle, that in the fire sacrifice, when something is offered, then that is taken by symbolically by the fire god Agni and sent to the various devatas, including ultimately the supreme. So devanam parmo Vishnu avmo Agni tadantara sarva devata. So the Vedas say that among all the devatas, Vishnu is the topmost, Agni is the lowermost. That means Agni is most accessible to us, and through him the sacrifice goes to the various devatas. He is the medium by which. So by which the sacrifice goes to, the sacrificed objects go, the oblations go to him. So now sacrifice, apart from the sacrifice, doesn't just mean offering something in a fire sacrifice. The fire is one way to sacrifice. The principle underlying sacrifice is to give up something which could be used for our enjoyment for a higher cause. And actually speaking, when we are purified, then that giving up for a higher cause gives us a greater fulfillment. So that is the essential principle of sacrifice. And we see that this principle of sacrifice needs to be applied very much in spiritual life. When, for example, when we want to remember Krishna, in our initial stages, thinking of other things may give us pleasure. But as a discipline, when we strive to fix the mind on Krishna, we are sacrificing our capacity to think of other things for the sake of Krishna's pleasure, because Krishna has instructed us in scripture to think about him. But by doing this, as we become purified, as we become more and more connected with Krishna, and Krishna is the source of supreme happiness. So that connection with Krishna through meditation, through contemplation, that itself brings for us the supreme satisfaction. So sacrifice means we give up something smaller for a higher cause and thereby get a higher return in the long run. And this principle of sacrifice actually is required for achieving anything constructive in life. For example, even in something like sports, it is not that a aspiring sports player becomes an overnight sports star. The sports player has to practice, exercise, and follow a very strict regimen before such a player can become a champion player. And similarly, if somebody wants to become an artist, somebody wants to become a musician, somebody wants to become an author, they all need to work hard. So Arjuna, we have the example. Now he was even ready to give up his night's sleep so that he could become proficient in archery, by which he could serve Krishna and serve the purpose of dharma. So the principle of sacrifice is something which is universal. It applies in our devotional life, it applies in our professional life, and even in family relationships. When we are all alone, we can do whatever we like. But when we are in relationship with others, those relationships often constrain our freedom. But at a positive level, those relationships force us to sacrifice, and in that sacrifice we grow. Earlier we could just act according to the whims of our mind and senses, but when we are with others, then we have to care for others' feelings, we have to work for others' purposes, and that's how we evolve from selfishness towards selflessness. So even when, say, we are working in a profession, working in a company. At that time, taking responsibility often means doing more than what is just needed for our job. We consider the broader scope for the expansion of the company, for the increasing the not just the profit of the company but increasing the contribution of the company. And in this way, when we think of something more than ourselves, that is how we grow in every aspect of life. And this growth, this is the essence of sacrifice. So when we as devotees focus on the supreme sacrifice, yajnanam japa yajñosmi, Krishna says among all sacrifices I am the sacrifice of yajna. So what this means is that he is inspiring us to rise to the highest level of selflessness, where we are ready to give up everything of this world for the sake of God. But such a evolution to the summit of sacrifice doesn't happen arbitrarily, and it certainly doesn't happen irresponsibly. That means we just neglectfully turn away from our other responsibilities. No. Yes, sometimes some people may renounce, but that is renunciation is for the taking of a higher responsibility. But if we are grahasthas and we are in the world, then we should see that all aspects of our life are opportunities to grow in selflessness. Our family relationships, they help us to come out of our atomic selfishness. That means we are always self-centered, but our circle of love expands through our family. Now, the scripture often condemns family attachment when we let the circle of expansion of our loves stay stuck at the family level. And we think that if I am caring for my family, now I don't need to do anything more. I don't need to devote myself to God. That is what the scripture contains, but that doesn't that is what the scripture condemn. But that doesn't mean that caring for family itself is wrong. It is, if we see the caring for family as a part, especially for those who are grahasthas, a necessary part of the expansion of our love, then we can see it extremely positively and do whatever is required in our relationship to keep those relationships healthy and to continue the evolution of our consciousness. Same with respect to profession. When we work in our profession, if we only think in terms of the salary that we get, then that is not a very evolved consciousness for working. If instead we understand that actually this is also an opportunity for us to expand our consciousness, and we sacrifice our comfort for increasing our contribution. Now again, there is the problem of workaholism, where people let their work consume their whole consciousness and their work becomes their universe, and they don't have time for family, and they certainly don't have time for God. That is of course undesirable. But when we see that, okay, if as I'm devoting myself to God, my service to God is not just done when I am chanting His names or going to the temple. That is important, and I need time and attention for doing those activities. But along with that, God's immanent presence is everywhere. Srila Prabhupada writes in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that the jurisdiction of God extends everywhere. Prabhupada writes in the 18th chapter that even when a person is working in a factory, at that time the person can be thinking of God and thinking of how I can serve Krishna here. So if we see even our work as a part of karma yoga, and we do it in that consciousness and that selflessness that we have to exhibit to do our work. Now we can do it forcibly because I need a paycheck, so I have to do my job, or we can think of it as something that helps us grow, and with that positive attitude we can see even our work as a part of our bhakti. And thus sacrifice, the principle of sacrifice, can subsume our entire life and enable us to grow through all the walks of our life. So sacrifice is definitely important. The spirit of sacrifice attains its culmination in pure love for Krishna, and it also includes all the aspects of our life as we evolve towards that culmination of selfless love. Thank you. Hare Krishna.